pregnant woman?
Many conversations with my mother and sisters. Yeah. You know, I mean, really, I think that's all you can do is just research it. It's always different, though, when you actually have or are experiencing that yourself. So a lot of it is definitely, you know, just feeling it out and feeling how this character would deal with situations.
And I just wanted to know how you got the role.
I heard about the script. I was actually out of town working on a different project and hadn't really heard anything about Lost because it was such a quick thing, you know. It was thought of and conceived and written and cast within, God, like I think 3 months from the day it was thought of until we started shooting. So it wasn't one of those things that had been around for a while and people had heard about. And I was away working, never got the script, but, you know, got wind of it and spoke to casting about it and sent a tape down of Claire and ended up working out. I'd never met anyone on it. I respected JJ's work greatly and had conversations with him about it, but that's kind of where it ends. There's no script, nothing. It was, I think, a leap of faith really on both halves, you know. I mean, of most of us not having a script, going on, you know, the creators and writers just putting out a good product and something that sounded so different and interesting. And also, I mean, for me especially, they'd never met me, so I hope they would like me when I rocked up in Hawaii, but everyone seemed to, you know, go together so well, which was a nice surprise. My view on the psychic's presence in her life was that, you know, he obviously knew the plane was going to crash. He knew that this was for a reason because he felt so strongly, for whatever reason, about me raising my own son, or child, for that matter, as opposed to anyone else. And haven't really found out if that is even true, because, I mean, the baby seems quite normal right now. I hope it stays normal. And as far as Ethan's character, that was kind of left up to the imagination a little bit. I feel like he almost has to come back in some way. I don't know how that'll happen, but I'm sure they'll figure it out. So. Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any theories you could share?
Yeah, you know, I really don't know. I mean, I had, you know, obviously there's so many theories going around that I think everything's been theorised already, but as far as, you know, whether we're all alive or whether we are actually dead and in purgatory, or all these things kind of cross my mind. There's definitely a reason we're here now. That's been explained, or there, whatever. And I still wonder. I think definitely one of us is alive, maybe all of us. It's kind of hard to tell, though. Maybe we're in limbo. I feel like, you know, the island's almost like a Bermuda Triangle in some way. Maybe.
If you were playing writer, what are some directions you'd like to see Claire move into in the next year, or so maybe some challenges or some growth that you'd like to see for your character?
You know, I think obviously life's changed very recently for Claire, as far as, you know, now being a mother and now having responsibility that she was not expecting to have. But also I feel like it's giving her a lot of freedom in another way, that being on the island, which was again unexpected, she is now able to be a lot more active and involved in things that she probably wanted to be, being a very independent, self-sufficient person, because she does have the support of so many people helping with the child and that situation, that, you know, she'll be able to really sort of go out and be more of a team member in that way, as opposed to sheltering herself and taking care of herself, which I don't think she's really too used to. So I think that'd be nice to see.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Hello, everybody.
Hello. Are you all from here? Or did you travel to see
the two of us.
Everybody who traveled from outside Los Angeles, raise your hand. Good, that's a good number. Well, the primary reason I had the job is because I didn't have to audition. Because if I had had to audition, I probably would not have gotten it. I had, for the second time in I think 2 years, organized a reunion with all my old college friends. And I'd organized it, and we rented places, and we were all going to get back together. And the morning before I was going to leave, 24 hours earlier, my agent called and said that she had been working, she knew the casting director of the show, and had been working with them and talking to them about this role that was coming up. And J.J. Abrams knew some of my previous work and thought that some of my previous stuff made me particularly well suited to playing Ethan, and they offered me the role. So I had to cancel. It was not a very difficult decision. I had to cancel my college reunion plans, although interestingly enough, the timing was that she called me at about 11 a.m. on a Wednesday, and that was 9 hours before the show debuted. So I had never seen an episode. Nobody had seen an episode. And I, of course, said yes because it's work, and I'm an actor, and I'm unemployed. But I had no idea that the show would be as good as it is. I had no idea about the character or the phenomenon it would become. So that's the story of my audition. And working in Hawaii was just like Mira said, it's beautiful. They put us up mostly in Honolulu, and then the show shoots around the island on various sets. And the weather's beautiful, and people are friendly, and everybody's in a good mood. It's a good place to work. So,
how much did the writers explain about your backstory or how you got to the island or who the hell you are? And based on the information you got, how did you figure out for yourselves as actors how to play your parts?
You know, you have to guess. You kind of have to figure it all out. At least me. I was not told anything. So I just have to use my imagination, you know, and guess, you know, and if I'm wrong, then I'm wrong, you know. But sometimes it gets tricky, you know. When we did the first part of the last two-parter, Exodus 1, you know, I didn't know what would happen in the second part. So it was very tricky to play, you know, this introduction into something that I didn't know. I mean, it's such a weird thing to do television, you know, because when you do anything else like film or theater, that's your job, to do all the research and to know all the background and all aspects of it. Here, you just can't. It's not possible. You don't have the necessary information, so you kind of, you know, use your instinct and imagination and hope for the best, I would say.
I was kind of in a similar boat. My first episode is I think it's Solitary, the one where they have the golf course, and I'm only in the very beginning of it. I think they only introduced me enough so that when I come in the next episode, people have a slight recognition of me. And I was not told very much at all. They gave me the sides, and I asked the writers. I pulled the writer aside, and I was asking all sorts of questions. She was being very coy with me, and I had to call the producer aside and say, you got to give me something to go on. And they really wouldn't tell me much at all. Even when I was shooting the next episode, they were, and I'm going to be careful how I word this in all your questions, because I don't know, like Mira, I know a bit more than has appeared on screen, so I have to be very careful not to reveal anything. But because literally, Damon will be knocking on my door tonight at midnight. But they had not quite decided, either I suspect that it was a combination of, one, not wanting me to know everything, and two, they're not having decided. And I feel comfortable now telling you this because I did a radio interview for the finale a couple weeks ago with Jorge, and he said this, was that when they shot my scenes, they had me do it almost every scene, and in fact every camera angle, about 6 different ways. And they would say, okay, now do it like you're really bad. Now do it like you're really nice. Now do it like you're a robot. Now do it like you are Bugs Bunny. And I'm not kidding you. And so the performance was in those first couple episodes, I suspect, really compiled in the editing room. And I finally really, for the next couple episodes, bore down on them and said, you guys, you have to give me some more information because I really feel, you really feel adrift. One of the difficult, for me at least, all of my questions, let's just preface with, in my opinion, in my experience, so I'm not speaking for anybody else, especially Mira. But one of the aspects of creating a character that isn't directly part of the acting craft is creating the arc or the development over the episode or over the show, and it really requires sort of a meta skill, an ability to calibrate and decide how much should I show of this particular color of the character in this part and how much later, and so you can kind of hold off developments and build up suspense, not only within the show, but within revelations about your character. And I think that's what she was talking about in the first and second part of Exodus. So it's really difficult because if you give everything in the first half, then your character has nothing really to show in the second half. And so I was doing a lot of guesswork, and fortunately they edited it well, and then they finally relented and gave me a little bit more information for the last couple episodes.
Well, I don't agree that there is any evil in that character. I mean, it's just an incredible amount of despair, you know, and and unhappiness and pain in that woman, you know, who went through all those horrible events, you know, that we kind of, you know, that the character talked about in the first, especially in the first episode that I appeared in. I mean, evil, I would never call her that. So, no, I never had that experience. I'm sorry to disappoint you. And people don't see it that way. I don't think, or maybe they do. You do. Evil. Well, taking the baby, yeah, that kind of shocked me too. You know, because I didn't know that that's how they're gonna take it. But there is just so much stuff that happened to that woman, you know, and her psychological state is so volatile and so fragile, and there were these 16 years by herself on this island. I mean, you know, mitigating, how do you say that? Mitigating what? Circumstances for that character. But you definitely, I think you have to see her in light of all that, you know?
It seems like there's a possibility of a love interest between you and Locke. I was wondering if that's actually... if that's something that you felt, if that's something that's been discussed, how do you feel about it if it's the first time you've heard the Just, I don't know, just
interesting
this
that people
little
saw
moments
that.
the two of you had together, it just seemed like maybe you're in love with Terry O'Quinn. I don't know.
Maybe I'm in love with it. You know, it could go any place, anywhere. I mean, it can go into so many different directions, and that's what's so beautiful. I mean, but yeah, that would be interesting, I think. Nothing's happening. We're just friends. No, I mean, you know, I barely know him. No, really? No, really, truly. No, but it's an interesting idea, you know.
Thank you.
Well, I have to say that the first episode, Solitary, I mean, was altogether my favorite, just because it had in itself an arch, you know, and it had so much complexity, and I loved working with Naveen, who I think is a really wonderful, serious, giving, generous actor, and that was just that work, and the director, and just the whole thing was beautiful. I couldn't, you know, I was thinking, sitting in my hotel room, do I have any, you know, anything that I would change? No, it was beautifully written. It had so many elements, and it was so rich, and it was so interesting to play. You know, after that, you know, there are a lot of times, I mean, it's a TV show, so there are a lot of times when you just serve the function of the story, you know. But that particular episode was a different thing. I mean, it was just, it was a great pleasure to do it.
Thank you.
I want to add, I mean, not only as an actor do you attempt to approach the material without judgment, but also I think that's what we somehow should strive to do in our lives, don't you think? I mean, you know, kind of get over these easy qualifications and labels. I mean, both on a big scale, you know, political scale and so on, and in our private lives. I mean, everything is gray, you know, and not black and white, and that's the beauty of it. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, let's hear it for them, everybody. Mira and William. Here's Jordan and Heather.
Hello.
Kate shakes her head. Then,
So I'm here. What do you want? Where is it?
Happy to tell you as soon as I get that kiss.
Wait, you're not serious, are you?
Baby, I'm tied to a tree in a jungle of mystery. I just got tortured by a damn spinal surgeon and a genuine Iraqi. Of course I'm serious.
Kate just looks at him, not knowing quite what to think.
You're not seeing the big picture here, Freckles. You really want to let that woman suffocate just because you don't want to give me one little kiss? Hell, it's only first base. Lucky for you, I ain't greedy. Making it real simple for you. You want to be a hero or not?
Yeah, it's ridiculous, but damn it if he doesn't make a compelling argument. And damn it if there isn't a strong contingent of women out there watching this show who want her to do it. And we can see the moment in which she makes up her mind.
Okay.
Okay.
Kate approaches him, squats down, gets close, looks into his eyes. He looks back, and here is the first kiss on Lost. And just before it actually goes from something else to real, Kate pulls away. And we milk this delicious moment for all it's worth. Finally, and when Sawyer talks to her now, it's softer. That kiss did something to him. Some of his swagger is gone. He's just a man now.
I don't have it.
What?
The medicine. I don't have it. I never did.
The book. They said that you had it in the suitcase.
Book washed up on shore. I had to draw the pages out. Damn good read, though.
Sawyer turns back, blood trickling from his lip. Camera out. Jordan and Heather. Heather, come back out. Let's hear it for Jordan and Heather. Take a bow. Thank you very much, guys.
Did you have to audition for this part?
Yeah, I actually read for the producers and the lovely casting director, April Webster. And although the script was quite different when I first read it, these things tend to evolve over time. You know, they're always changing the scripts, and probably have heard that from some of the actors on the show that they keep you guessing.
How did the script that you auditioned with differ?
Well, first of all, the baby was definitely eviler. It was definitely, something was going to be a bit scary about him. And I think it got turned more into a thing where the baby was in some kind of danger. The main thing that was in the script that I really, that helped me was the first line he says, he was actually started out in a nightclub, in this hip nightclub, and there's this little mousy guy sitting there reading fortunes. And Claire and Rachel ask him how much a reading is, and he goes, those are my pricings. In this sort of mousy little, the way he said pricings was sort of really helpful to me for the character, because it told me that he was a little bit odd. Well, I grew up all over the world, different parts of Europe and so forth, and I just had a love for it and had an ear for it, and when I started acting, it kind of came in really useful. And I became interested in the different kinds of accents in each one place. Like I was saying, there's a lot of Aussies who sort of talk like this. Well, then there's people who might, be from Queensland or somewhere, might talk like this. And then you got these real loud bastards down around Bondi Beach who can talk like this every now and then. Ah, jeez, mate, what do you reckon?
Fantastic.
Then, of course, you got your Kiwis. The Kiwis want to be Aussies, and they're very jealous of the Aussies, but,
So which did you prefer, drama or...
I prefer drama.
You like the drama?
Drama, yeah.
Yeah, I'm a very serious person. I don't know if you'd noticed that. I take myself very seriously. I don't like silliness at all, so please don't cast me in anything weird anymore, I'm begging you.
Yeah, right. Do Richard Malkin as Senator Palpatine or something.
How was it working with Claire?
Danger surrounds this baby, young Claire. The force is strong in this baby. But young Ethan has gone to the dark side of the island. And as for you, Danielle, have you escaped from Babylon 5 or I can find you?
Funny, I worked with Mira Furlan on Babylon 5. And that was a strange show to work on because we wore these huge masks, if any of you guys have seen that show. And you can't hear anything anybody's saying. And Mira has a very, or she did then have a very soft voice, a very gentle character. And of course in this she's, got guns and knives and, she'll kick your ass in a minute. But the scene was something like this. I was here to deliver this cargo. I will do what I have to do. Yes. You just couldn't hear anything at all.
Would you just talk about developing a character in the way you tend to often come in just, usually guest for a day or 2 days or perhaps, and talk about the challenges of that. I'm not saying it's easier to develop a character for a long period of time, but you get to live in a character and explore different areas, and a lot of times, the nature of the roles you get aren't doing that. So how do you find the fun, and it's a different animal, isn't it? Can you talk a little bit about that?
It is. I actually prefer it, I'm a real heretic in that way. I prefer doing film and TV because you don't have that much time, and it's more instinctive. And I like the discipline of everybody looking at you and rolling, and you absolutely have to not screw up. Whereas in a play, you have weeks to screw up and explore the character. But, and it's all about screwing up. But seriously, I like to have the instinctive thing of you read what the writer wrote, and what does that immediately bring up in you, and then you kind of go with that. In the case of this character, again, it was Lynn's language that she wrote, the sort of tentative way that he spoke, that really gave me an idea who Richard Malkin was. And as far as what he was seeing behind when he's looking, I kind of just went with my own imagination with that. Because, again, I don't know where the show is going, it's like, I don't know. What am I seeing in there? Nobody's going to tell me, so I better make it up. So it was just sort of a lot of imagery and things like that, and that was something to develop. And also, because of the kind of guy he was, I thought of a lot of Australians that I've seen on Australian television. I saw a minister once. This is a hilarious guy. He was the head of a Christian singles group. And their job was to make sure that, we want to make sure that singles don't get too lonely. And that, people are there to look out after them because, well, if you live alone, you might not have someone to cook for you, see? So we go around and bring them a meal, and maybe if they're in the toilet and there's no one waiting for the toilet, they might forget to come out. So you're just sort of not going to. It was almost that silly. So I thought of him. I thought of an Aussie character named Slim Dusty, to give him that sort of quiet little voice. And then, you know, the rest was getting up with the wonderful Emily, who you've just heard from. And, you know, all you do, you know, getting what I got from her, I mean, that's what the scene is then, it's the back and forth.
You know, it's interesting. I think Hurley was probably I didn't write the Hurley episode. David Fury did, and Brent Fletcher did, as we all know. Woo, David! Woo! Okay. But Hurley was the hardest character to come up with a backstory for. And, I mean, my contribution to that primarily was to try to advocate for making him manifestly Hispanic, you know, so the Hugo Reyes thing, and to have him really come from that background, because I'm Puerto Rican, and it's important to me that, hey, we've got an actor named Jorge Garcia on the show. Let's take a leap here and make him actually, you know, Hispanic. And so that was a big deal. And, you know, and actually, I mean, his backstory changed a lot, you know, because he's not a dark character. He doesn't have sort of a darkness of the soul. He's a very fun sort of guy. So, you know, it's a little bit difficult to come up with some sort of dramatically heavy story for this guy, you know. So he was probably the hardest, actually. Jack's backstory was, I was the custodian of Jack's backstory very early on, and that story is pretty much the same from what we came up with, you know, when we were writing the pilot, because it was a very compelling thing that we sort of came up with. And frankly, you know, Sun and Jin were not my favorite characters when I started writing the story, and it was weird because, you know, I wound up writing the Michael, Sun and Jin episode, you know, where it was not Michael's backstory, but Michael-centric, and about Michael and Walt, and I thought, what do I have in common with a single dad and a Korean couple that doesn't speak any English, you know? And it's not a lot. So, you know, so I approached that episode with a lot of trepidation. I don't know if I could be able to do justice to it, and it was just really rewarding writing experience, and it was great. So I have to say that if I had to pick favorite characters, which I prefer to not do, because that's like, you know, okay, then, you know, everybody gets pissed off at you, and, you know, whatever. Because the actors really care what I think, and that's what matters. If I say Sun and Jin are my favorites, you know, then Matthew Fox is going to be on my cell phone like now, going, hey, I heard. And I'm like, how could you have just heard? I said it 2 minutes ago. And he's like, it's on the internet, dude. So, so you know, no, but Sun and Jin, I feel like I was sort of custodian to their story, and that was a really important one for me. So, we had 48 castaways to start with, and I think it's really important that, you know, this is a show that can't have guest stars, you know, unless it's like Gilligan's Island, where like the theater promoter winds up parachuting into the island and they build a stage so Ginger can audition, you know. So because the show can't have guest stars, it was important to pick a very large number of people to be stranded in this island so we can just sort of randomly pick people out of the chorus. We know that the audience was starting to say, gee, what about the other 36 people or 48 people or whatever the hell they are? And it's just a question of, you know, we need to have that pool of people ready so we can either, you know, bring up a couple of red shirts or meat socks, as we like to call them, and have them killed, or to really introduce new characters into the island, you know. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. So it was to address that, and also to say, you know, there are other people on this island with our characters who were on the plane, and like Arzt, you know, they're going to come up every once in a while, and I think it's important for us to sort of establish that so that it's not a jarring thing when we start bringing people out, too, you know.
I'm curious about the numbers, that the ones at Hurley, the 4, the 8.
So am I. I'm curious about them, too, actually, yeah.
I mean, on the way here, I bought a lottery ticket just in the hope that it was a sign that I should.
Yeah, guys, don't play the numbers, okay? Honestly, don't play. People tried that. It's like, it's weird. It's creepy.
Are we going to learn anything about these numbers?
Here's the thing. You're going to learn about everything, okay? Everything will be explained in some way, perhaps satisfactory, perhaps unsatisfactory. Your mileage may vary. But I think what's important to know is that, you know, on the show, we are always going to give you some sort of plausible and perhaps implausible explanation of something. Like, for example, the monster. You know, in the pilot we said the monster is a security system for the island. That was said by somebody who'd been on the island for 16 years. So that means something, you know. She may not be entirely right, she may not be entirely wrong, but it's an explanation. So, you know, we want the show to last a long time. So if tomorrow I came out and said, well, you know, we came out and said, well, underneath all that smoke is just this sort of giant, you know, tentacled rectum, you know, then you'd be like, well, it's a giant tentacled rectum. Now we know that. I mean, it's done. Okay, I guess I can go watch, like, you know, 24 now or something. And so we need to, you know, have a need to kind of carry you along with us in this narrative, you know. So will there be answers? You bet. Do we know the answers? Yes. Can we give them to you immediately and in one convenient, fun package? Absolutely not, because then the show's over.
believe how badly he treats his father? I mean, the guy has a cocktail occasionally. I never treated my father like that. So, anybody ever heard of string theory? Oh, good, good. I think that's what's going on here. I think that they have fallen in a tear in the fabric of the universe, and they're co-creating this reality together. And that's my not very learned opinion. Let's see, 40 some odd people survive a plane crash where the plane breaks up at 40,000 feet. No oxygen, it's about 60, 80 below Fahrenheit. They fall 40,000 feet and walk away? Yeah, I don't know.
Could you tell us about what you feel the relationship is between Jack and his father? Is that too...
It's a very personal question. Look, Dr. Shepard is a grossly misunderstood human being. He's a very decent, hardworking man who it has nothing to do with anything based in my reality. I had a great father. I hope I'm a decent father. But, you know, some people don't like competition, that their ego is so large and yet very fragile that they must control their environment so that no one can approach them, can be any better than they are. And I think that he, when Jack was as a young boy, he tried to train. He never felt that Jack had what it took to be what he considers himself to be, which is a very powerful, excellent surgeon, man. And he tried to dissuade him from a very early age to make decisions on his own, to be a powerful human being. And fortunately for Jack, he found it within himself to become exactly what his father did not want him to become, which was someone who is actually better than he is. And the scene in the bar with Josh Holloway really said it all. You know, it was a really wonderfully, it's one of the finest, it's some of the finest writing that for television that I've had the opportunity to do. It was just spectacular writing, and I thank the writer of that scene. But I think that ultimately that said it all, that he came to realize that he was, that Dr. Shepard had made some pretty serious mistakes in his life in raising his son, and came to realize that in fact Jack was the man that he wished he was, but still didn't have the courage, the guts, to walk up to him and tell him to his face. So he tells a stranger in a bar who just happens to crash, tells a stranger in a bar to go out and do the business that needs to be taken care of so that you can have a happier life. So he goes off and kills the wrong guy. You know, he just never, he can't. He's incapable of giving good advice.
One of the things my friends and I noticed was the first episode, they showed you kind of as a sinister character. Then they kind of softened you up at the wedding and the scene with Josh Holloway. You seemed to be more human there, and I was wondering if you thought they did that they had gone through and changed their minds halfway through and decided to warm you up as a character, or if it was planned all along.
You know, characters are like onions.
Layers.
You know what I'm saying? You peel the layers back and you reveal different aspects of a character. Just because a guy's, you know, maybe not having the best day of his life, just because he feels one way about his son and then maybe changes his mind 20 years later. I mean, you know, we're talking about 20 years have passed. And I don't think that it's another wonderful thing about the writing on this show is that it's complex, it's human, it's not stereotypical. And So I don't see, I don't know how to answer your question, because I just see it as a more complex character as opposed to a character who has necessarily changed. We all grow, we all become more of who we can be or less than who we can be.
I wanted to thank everybody for coming out for the first one of these things. We all sort of have been walking around in quiet, water, awe of how many people are interested in the show. We've always felt it was something special, but just the idea that we've created a fan community in such a short period of time, and we're all sort of fanboys ourselves. So it's a real surreal dream come true to be up here in a situation like this, and we didn't really prepare any sort of song and dance or shtick, but the more that we can interact with you guys, the better. So any questions that you have about the show, we are more than happy to answer. I do apologize in advance if we are sort of political and dodgy about answering questions about the future. But again, you know, the show, the franchise of the show is that's sort of steeped in this mystery, and although we'll probably give you a couple hints that the sort of populace at large will not get, and hopefully we'll leave here today and you'll know some things that you haven't read, we want to sort of keep the surprise alive for you in terms of what's going on in Season 2. We started working on Season 2, the writers, almost immediately after we finished writing the finale. And as we were starting the finale, obviously, we had many ideas that we wanted to employ, but we've sort of already sketched out a pretty detailed idea of where we're going and where we're going to end this season. But as always, it's a very organic process, so we don't know exactly at what pace we're going to do it. We know we're doing 23 episodes this year that we're going to be on the air. I believe our premiere date is September 20th or September 21st. You guys all know about the new time slot, 9 o'clock. Same night, which is very exciting for us because Lost in half the country is on at 7 o'clock this past year, which is very early. People are just getting back from work and that sort of a thing. And we feel that the subject matter has been somewhat dark and violent at times. And I don't know if it's as much of a family show as a lot of people give it credit for. So I think 9 o'clock is much more, you know, once you're shoving bamboo under someone's fingernails, I'm kind of thinking...
Yeah, the incest didn't help that either.
Yeah, incest, definitely. As if the incest didn't do it, I don't know what did, but we won a family award this year, which was very flattering, so we're not going to bite the hand that feeds us.
Yeah, we got the commendation from the Arab American League the week before the Saeed torture episode.
Right.
And then
I believe it was the first time that they actually had a commendation rescinded in their brief history, but...
yeah. And the family came, I think, the week before the incest. So you know.
Yeah, exactly. So you know, we're ahead of the curve on such things. But for those, I just wanted to do sort of a quick rundown of these guys. I know that they got introduction. Michael Giacchino, the composer of the show. He does something for television that hasn't been done in many years, and if any of you guys want to know more about it, you should certainly ask him questions. But what's amazing, and I finally got to my first scoring session at the end of this season because the writer's room has been so consuming, is that he convenes a live orchestra. Not once for every 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 episodes, but every single week. And the beautiful music that you guys hear is not a guy with a synthesizer and a dude on drums. It's literally when you guys see, you know, live scoring for movies, it's exactly the same thing. It's a full orchestra, and he writes that music and scores that music every single week. So he is to be commended for that.
I believe there are only 4 shows. How many shows? I believe there are only 4 shows that are using live orchestras, and 2 of them.
There's not many shows. I mean, all of us probably growing up know that you learn a lot of art through popular culture. So there's a lot of shows on TV now that are just using synth and not using live orchestra. So for me, anyway, it's a great way to kind of get that art back into some of the stuff we do. ever wake. It's a
And
real
we'll-
just
We'll keep
lucky.
telling you who Michael is. He also does the music for Alias, also with a live orchestra. And he just finished scoring his first film this year, The Incredibles.
You might have heard of that one.
And as you guys might realize, we have to lean very heavily on Michael because we sort of had this rule going into the show that we didn't want to do needle drops, which are sort of the industry term for when you use like a popular song in the show. We felt that the isolation of the castaways would become sort of much more visceral if they were completely cut off from the world and sort of playing popular music unless they were hearing it. So we came up with the idea that Hurley had this CD player with him, so if he was listening to a song, then we would hear it, but once his batteries died, we stopped the needle drops. So the only time that you hear popular music on the show now is in the flashbacks. So
I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
I mean, I just thought I had more work to do.
Yeah, exactly. We're like, how can we put him to work more? But
you sure there's no CD players left on the airplane? Nothing
they
they could bring
might
back?
find a cache of batteries
Okay.
at some point. But and the
Satellite
other
radio?
rule, the other rule was you couldn't play music on the show that came out after September 22nd, 2004, which is when the show premiered, because they wouldn't have had it with them when they got on the plane. So we often, as Javi will tell you in the writer's room, try to say, wow, they're really only in October of 2004 right now, at least from their own perspective. Who knows where and when they are for our purposes. But for their purposes, the idea that they are sort of, they don't know who won the election between Bush and Kerry, like that hasn't happened yet for them. So they're still in, I guess, around Halloween of 2004 by their clock, which is sort of cool, because we've now gone a year beyond them.
How did you decide what characters you wanted on the island to start?
I think as we first started talking about, Berkey was there that first day that I met with JJ. And the first thing that we started talking about before we started talking about the island, it was sort of a given that the island was going to be weird and mysterious, but we knew that the show was going to sort of sink or swim on who the characters were. And instead of trying to go too far outside the box and say we want to be original and do something that no one else has done, we realized that in drama there's certain character archetypes that will create great conflict. And when we started talking about the movies and television shows that we loved, the idea that there needed to be sort of the main lead, a hero, that guy, should probably have a skill set that the other characters are going to need. So making him a doctor sort of made a lot of sense to us. And then we were like, well, all right, that covers Luke. Now we need Han Solo. So, who's going to be the asshole who only cares about himself, but but everybody wants him to take his shirt off, and so that was pretty much. Javi will be taking his shirt off at 4 o'clock, by the way. That took care of Sawyer, and then we just sort of went down the line and said there should be a soldier, there should be someone who is sort of mystical and is like sort of the mystery on the island. They sort of channel it, and there should be a father and a son, and we just sort of went one by one with very, very vague sort of there should be a guy who's funny. Like it just started that vague, and then we started bringing actors in to read for parts that hadn't really been written yet. So one process really fed the other. So Hurley didn't exist until Jorge Garcia came in and read for the show, and then we started writing the character to him. And Sawyer was originally constructed as sort of a Prada suit-wearing, boiler room con man, sort of slick, New York, educated guy. And then Josh Holloway came in, and he was an entirely different thing than we had imagined it, but we were like, oh, we want that. So we rewrote the character for him, and I think where TV gets it wrong a lot, and what JJ is so good at is that it becomes a very organic process. Instead of in your writer's brain saying, no, I want it to be this and this and this and that, if you're a little less formed in your ideas of what you want the character to be, and then you start casting, you'll let the actor feed your idea of what the character is, and then it feels much more natural. So as many of you probably know, there were a lot of decisions made at the 11th hour about the show. Jack died in the original pilot around at the end of Act 2. So that changed certain dynamics. Kate's backstory in the original pilot was considerably different than what it ended up being, which is that, you know, she was a fugitive. So all of that stuff, you know, happened on the fly, and we're, I think, a much better show for it.
Beyond initial conceptions of the characters, are there particular storylines that you abandoned once the actors really grew into these roles? Things that you thought in the writer's room you might have these characters doing that you tossed away?
One example is that Hurley is a character that, you know, backstory-wise, as we began, a lot of the characters, we had very fully formed ideas of what their flashback stories were going to be, exactly who they were, sort of what the monkey on their back was, what their redemption tale was. You know, Jack was certainly a character that we talked a lot about, Kate a lot, Sawyer a lot. Like, all the concept of their character was pretty much fully baked before we started writing the series. But Hurley was a guy, because of who he was and because he was so funny and accessible and amiable, we started to try to come up with sort of a darker backstory for the guy, thinking, what is his redemption tale? What did he do that he feels guilty about? And every time we tried it, it just didn't fit. You know, it was just like, I don't buy that this guy ever did anything bad in his life. He's such a sweet guy. So, you know, one of the things that we had come up with early on was that Hurley was a repo man, that it was his job to, you know, basically, has anyone seen that movie Roger and Me? A documentary, Michael Moore's documentary. There's this guy who's essentially, it's his job to sort of come to your house and evict you from your house and take your stuff. And he was this very sweet guy. He did it with a smile, but the job was totally terrible. And we just tried it on, and again, it just didn't fit, so we ditched that. But I think more in a matter of, it's not so much pathways that we want to. Most of the time when we commit to something, we carry it out. I think it's more a matter of stuff that we didn't conceive of at all, that we go, oh, wait a minute, let's try that. Like, the thing that leaps immediately to mind is Boone and Shannon were very, very hard to write for in the early part of the show, because the brother-sister act, she's the bitch, he's the one who takes care of her, sort of like their character, and because they were younger, it was hard to write for them because they didn't inherently have the same depth as the other characters, and we didn't want them to sort of become the sitcom, cheesy, you know, textbook realization of those two characters. So we basically, once Claire got abducted, we said, well, it'd be cool if Boone wants to go and him and Locke can have a couple scenes together. And literally that sort of decision, and that was in Javi's episode, sort of launched us. It pretty much predetermined the entire end run of the season, all the way through Boone's death and to Jack and Locke's conflict over it. That idea, because it had never occurred to us in the breaking of the first 4 or 5 episodes of the show that Boone and Locke were going to buddy up.
And we didn't necessarily get to that immediately on that episode either. I mean, at one point it was Boone and Locke and Sullivan with the skin condition from Fury's episode.
Right, because we were like, we can kill him.
Yeah, exactly. But it sort of evolved into the Boone and Locke thing too. So
right.
And it was actually when we were first putting the show together, Damon wrote scenes. They're called sides for the actors to audition with, and there was a scene he wrote between Shannon and Walt, which we used to cast both those characters, which we never used. It was this great scene. And the funny thing is that it wasn't until the very final episode, or the second to last episode, that we finally had that Shannon Walt scene, which is completely different than how it originally started. But eventually, things come around.
As we go, because there's so many characters on the show, you're like, we wrote the scene in the finale where Claire and Son are talking to each other, sorry, it was Shannon and Son, and we were like, hey, if Shannon and Son actually said one word to each other the entire year, no, this is actually their first scene, and it's like, of course, between the cracks, the characters are all relating with each other, they know each other's names, they have scenes that we don't see, but the idea that we can mix and match in that way was always really exciting to us. The numbers phenomenon is, you know, obviously we thought we were being very clever in seeding certain things throughout the series, and that the numbers, obviously, we chose those numbers for a reason. But I think the idea that you can sort of go back and apply certain logic to something like that. It was definitely not intentional in terms of the naming of the characters that it would be 4 and 5. But then, if I can get, my feet on the ground, but also I look at this stuff as it's not a coincidence. I think that there is in our writers' brains sort of a subconscious thing that you do when you write a TV show that sometimes you don't intend it, but I find that very surprising. How could you look at something like that and say that it's just a coincidence? So,
I have a question about the numbers. Did you know how the shows kind of revolve around the numbers before you started the first season? Did you know how big the numbers were going to be in the show?
No, we had no idea that the numbers were going to be that big. And I think that, again, this idea that what was Hurley's backstory going to be, the idea that he had won the lottery and what the numbers were and that the numbers were cursed and that Rousseau had brought in there was stuff that we had thought about, but
Made up while you were shooting a show, ooh, this would fit in really well.
not entirely like that. I would say when we were writing the pilot, it was completely off the radar. But then as we began to talk about the show and talk about Hurley, then it became a much bigger deal. But we had no idea the morning after the show, when those numbers aired, that people would start playing those numbers in the lottery, or that they would start, we chose those numbers and we thought, oh, it's going to take people weeks and weeks and weeks to figure out, why these numbers, and instantly, because I think of the net, that the people got on and sort of started exchanging clues and saying, oh, in Kate's episode, she got sold down the river for $23,000, and they, and their flight is 8 and 15. So people started finding instances of the numbers from the show all along. And then we found out, if you just sort of did a search on those numbers, that they were all retired Yankees jerseys, or that those numbers, if you put them into the right search engine with the right criteria, you get different hits on different things, and suddenly, Thurman Munson was on the New York Yankees. His number was retired. He died in a plane crash. So you look at that, he was number 15, I believe. So you look at that stuff and you go, oh, okay, obviously they intended it. So again, I'll start telling people that we did.
I was wondering if you could talk about your instrumentation and what you're thinking about composing, what kind of sound you're looking for and stuff like that.
Yeah, sure. I remember when you guys were writing this pilot and you were casting it, and I would have these late night conversations with JJ and talking about, well, what's the music going to be? What's it going to, how are we going to do this? So I'm like, well, whatever we do, I want it to be something that when you're watching the show, if you closed your eyes, you'd know you were watching Lost, So I want to set up a palette and stick with that palette through the entire year. So I just started calling them saying, what if we did this? What if we did this? How about a harp? But not a harp in the sense that it's all magical and happy fairy harp. I just want them to grab the last string and go bong, It's like a harp player's nightmare, my sessions. These poor people have been studying for 100 years in an empty room, and I ask them, just hit the low C. Ging. They're like, seriously, I can do more than that. I'm like, no, I just want that, and I'm always waiting for them, well, why don't you come in and do it then, But the players are great. So we have the harp, I feel like, is kind of the cornerstone. And then we have the string section, because I knew we were going to be, I told JJ, I said, to me, it just feels like I want the music to feel lost as well, in a way. It should be heartbreaking at times, uplifting at times, ambiguous at times, but, and the strings really kind of help with that. We have a full string section. And then trombones, 4 trombones, which is that sound that these guys were talking about. And it's actually quite a controversial sound, that kind of a thing, because we're working on this thing week to week. We hear it all the time, and so we fight amongst ourselves. Should we do it? Should we not do it? Should we, so that's that. But that sound that you hear, those are 4 trombones. And then there is the percussion guy. Now the percussion guy brings in all kinds of weird stuff, and there's different sounds in there that we created actually on the show. There's something called that we call a grunt muffin, And I used to have a dog when I was a kid that had a breathing problem, and her name was Muffin, and she would grunt all the time. So I'd named this sound, and it's like this hung, 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 and I don't know if you recognize, but in the show that sound, comes up. So there's a sound, and that's made by, we have a piano board that was ripped out of the guts of a piano, and it's just an old rusty piano board, and there's a guy with a mallet about this big who just goes boom and just hits it, and it's like this creepy sound, and that's what that is. There's anklongs and different other kind of, but the one thing I know I didn't want, we were talking about, what about like flutes and woodwinds and all that, and shakuhachi flutes and different ethnic stuff, and I thought, no, I don't want to do any of that because jungle-themed movies and television shows always have that, and I wanted it to not be that. I didn't want to score it like we're so much in a jungle. So all the percussion we have pieces of the airplane that is in our percussion. They actually shipped back sections of the airplane, and our percussionists use that. That's what they're banging on, And a lot of the times when in these scenes you hear rhythmic figures going on, it's them playing the actual pieces of the airplane from the show. So we, try and find the weirdest, strangest things we can and make you uncomfortable when we need to make you uncomfortable, and sad when we want you to be sad. So, I don't know. Hopefully it's working.
If I can just take 1 minute here to just, as I promised, Brian Burke, or Berkey as he's known, who's sitting next to me, a lot of times we watch TV shows, we see executive producer or supervising producer, we go, what are all these people? What are all these producers? I don't know what they do. And on this
Including
show...
me.
Yeah, I still don't quite. Berkey was there on the first day that Lost was born when I first came in to meet with JJ, and obviously he'd been working on Alias for quite some time, and basically, there would be no Lost without him. He's involved from sort of, yes, please applaud. From the outline stage, the conceptual stage, through the script, but where his real focus is once we are done actually shooting the episode and it's in the can, that is when he works his magic. And on a show like Lost, I think, other than the fact that our production team in Hawaii is so awesome, but the reason that it has that real movie feel to it is because not just Michael's beautiful music, but everything that happens after the show is done, from the editing to the sound design, and everything has to happen in roughly about 5 or 6 days in most cases. And Berkey's doing that on Alias as well. He spent hours and hours and hours and hours just getting the monster sounds right, for not just the pilot but also the finale. There has to be a consistency, as we've talked about amongst ourselves, as to what the monster is. When we eventually reveal it to the audience, we want people to be able to go back, watch the show, and for it to sound right, and for it to feel right, and Berkey does all that. So if anybody has any questions about sort of the sounds and the feel and the editing and the pacing and all that stuff of the show, this man to my right is responsible for all that, and I am grateful for him every single day. One of the unsung heroes of the show.
If you didn't have your hands tied and you guys could give either a concrete rational explanation or a concrete sci-fi one, would you choose to do that, and which one would you choose?
I think, certainly for JJ and I, when we first started talking about the show, there was no doubt in our minds and our hearts that it was a science fiction show. That there were going to be things that fell for us under the realm of sci-fi, just in terms of when something happens, my brain always goes to the mystical and the fantastical in the world, as opposed to, oh, there's a perfectly rational explanation for that. I've always been sort of much more a Mulder than a Scully in my sort of heart and my mind. And certainly a guy like Javi, who is, I think, the second writer we hired, who has a sort of rich sci-fi background and all the work that he's done. But it was important to balance out the writing staff with Scully's, because I think had we not done that, we would have been much more inclined to go to a much more fantastical place. Now, for me, an episode like Walkabout, when I first started saying to people, yes, I know we talked about Locke's backstory. I know that he was a pencil pusher and that all of his know-how about survival basically comes from books and games. But on top of that, he was in a wheelchair before the crash. The people's initial reaction to that, even internally on the show, was, "Wait, I don't understand. How does that make sense?" And I go, "Yeah, exactly. It's kind of cool, isn't it? Like, the plane crashes, now he can walk." And for me, the fact that you can watch that and say, "Oh, there's a perfectly rational explanation for that. It's psychosomatic. He wasn't really crippled," but you don't have the same information that I do. You don't know how he ended up in the wheelchair, so you don't know whether it was a miracle or whether it wasn't. And I think that level of, your opinion makes it interactive, so that it makes it a social show, so you guys can talk amongst yourselves as to what you believe. And as writers, we don't want to take that away from you. The idea of, we go out into the world every day and sort of interpret the things around us, and we want to say, wow, the fact that the tsunami happened, and you think, wow, 100,000 people get killed in a single event, they're probably not going to be very religious afterwards. They're probably going to be really angry. Why would God do this to them? But in fact, they became devoutly religious afterwards because they want to find purpose in what happened. And I think for us, the show, wanting to find purpose in everything that happens, you have to go to this sort of mystical place, because there isn't a rational, we know in our daily lives that there is not a rational explanation for everything that happens. And for me, it's more comforting to know that there could be a supernatural or a mystical explanation for those things than to say, no, there's no science fiction element to the show. It's all happening in the realm. Jack was just hallucinating. He was cranky. He had a bad day. So he saw the ghost of his dead father, who just coincidentally happened to lead him to his own coffin, which was empty, and a water source. So, we lean towards the sort of mystical element in our hearts, but we write the show so that you can continue to have that debate.
This whole year has been brand new for me. Thank you. I mean, there's only 2 Christmases that I haven't had to work retail, so it's still really new.
Did you have to practice how many different ways you could say dude?
No. Although, the thing about the dudes is I once got called into ADR, which, anyone knows ADR? Where you gotta go in and re-record dialogue. And I had only like 15 minutes of ADR for some reason. I had one line to do, and I was joking that it's gonna be a dude, and it was a dude. That I was like, should I just like bank a bunch of dudes for you in various situations so that it'll cover it?
At what point did you find out that Hurley's a millionaire?
There was a time when I had a feeling about something. I don't remember exactly what moment it was, but it really got solidified when we went to reshoot a scene where I'm playing backgammon with Walt. And that was a scene that got added into an earlier episode that we had already wrapped just to plant a few more seeds. And the day that we were shooting that, they added the line where I say, "You'll get it," because I owe him a bunch of money. And that's where I was like, okay, so I didn't know it was lottery, but I knew that came from money.
So were you playing him poor before that, and did it change the way you saw the character after you found out he was that rich?
See, well, not for me. Like, I've had discussions with some other actors who've kind of gotten a little pissed at finding out about something about their character later and being like, I would have done it completely differently. But for me, look, I really, from an acting standpoint, I do believe that characters reveal through contradiction. So I don't think everyone behaves the way you'd expect them to behave at every time. So I think it works for Hurley to win the lottery after learning who he was at the beginning and just always chipping in and not being your typical millionaire. I think it just works.
Could you tell us about your casting call when you met Ian for the first time and how you connected again later? And it's a really good story.
It was, so my Curb Your Enthusiasm aired, and then I had my meeting like the week after, which is, it's really cool when you walk into the room and they recognize you. And like they're like, oh yeah, this guy, kind of, you feel like that when you walk in. And they didn't have, Hurley wasn't written yet. They kind of had a basic type description of him, but yeah, they didn't have anything written about him yet, and they had me read sides for Sawyer. No, not that scene. Actually, none of the scenes I think actually made it. None of those were just scenes. None of that stuff was in the script eventually. But I went and did Sawyer sides, but I kind of did it with my own flavor, I guess. And when I tested, they had written a couple scenes for Hurley. And when we went in, it was Ian and Dominic and me. We were the only guys reading for our parts at the studio, and then later the network test. And that, I was like on the phone with my agent going, I don't know, there's no other Hurleys there. I don't know what that means, but I think it's good. And the other cool thing about testing with that show is you walk in on the test, it's so different from any other pilot test I'd been to because it was so clearly still JJ's room. And because you had his, seal of approval, you felt really confident and really strong being there. And then I'm sitting in the parking lot, and Ian passes me by, and he's like, "See you in Hawaii, bitch," and he walks past me, and gets into his car, and that became like the moment I see him the first time in the makeup chair. I was like, "Hey, see you in Hawaii, bitch." That was our little reunion greeting.